And now, it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for. It's the main event. It's the big show. It's the bout to end all bouts. It's the grudge match between the biggest names in science. Okay, that might be a stretch. This is Vaguely Scientific. Now, stepping into the ring, I may not be a scientist, but what I lack in brains, I make up for in convincing people that I have brains. I am Derek. And in the red corner, with a mind vast enough to map the stars and reckless enough to make Frankenstein blush, our resident PhD in why not, it's Jim, the scientist. Hi, Jim.
See, I was so busy thinking about whether or not I could, I never stopped to think about whether or not I should.
Oh, and in the blue corner, with a brain packed full of prehistoric power and Pokedex entries, she's the master anamorpher who's gonna catch 'em all and then some. It's Allie! Hello, Allie.
Wow, hello everyone. Thank you, that was a marvelous introduction.
I spent all day on that.
I'm gonna win this match, Jim.
I mean, I guarantee you're going to beat anyone that I know in Pokemon.
That's true.
This is the show where listeners send in questions to hear our vaguely scientific answers, and who knows, we might even get some of those answers right. But first, let's get ready to hear Jim's fun science fact of the day. Jim?
You're really leaning into this today.
That's the whole, I'm done now. That was the whole theme.
I mean, it might pop back up later. Who knows? Anyway, here's the fun science fact. The folds on the cerebral cortex of the brain, which is the outermost layer of your brain, increase the amount of surface area on our brains. And this actually helps to improve the amount of thinking that we can do.
So, like, the more wrinkly it is actually more brain power.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that before, but I didn't know that it was like actually true.
Yeah, no, it's a very important part of the ability to actually think and process correctly, to have all these bumps and ridges and folds and whatnot.
And I assume that it just is like, it gives you more real estate, like you said, but it also must have a evolutionary function as well beyond that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's just super cool because our brains are so complicated and they have so much power to them, and we still can't replicate that with the computer yet, which I think is just super cool.
Yeah. What do you always call it? A haunted electrified meat?
Oh, a haunted meat clod.
Yeah.
Haunted meat clod. That's good. Well, speaking of using our brains,
and going to the brain forest.
No, Jim, no. We won't be doing that.
Oh, there's where you're wrong, my friend.
Oh no, I'm real scared. Before we are dragged into Jim's brain forest, we should probably do some housekeeping in that segment that we like to call Stuff We Got Wrong and Actually Bothered to Look Up Later. Woo!
Wow!
Back in episode 161, A Living Creature That Will Swallow Your Mail, Jim was talking about Barney Rubble using a crab as a lawnmower. He said that it might not work well because crabs can't breathe on land, and turns out some crabs can breathe okay out of water. As long as their gills remain moist, they can get oxygen out of the air for some time. How long this is depends on the species of crab, so as long as Barney dunks his crab mower back into the tank when he's done, this is not nearly as implausible as it sounded for at least and probably only that specific reason.
Yeah.
Wow! That's pretty amazing.
Time for crab.
It's always time for crab. We should all become crabs.
If you've got time for gab, you've got time for crab.
What's it called that everything is going back to crab?
Oh, carcinization, I think.
That. Yeah, I'd like that.
We can all be crabs.
I think I would be happier as a crab.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You wouldn't be crabby.
Ah.
I know somebody listening already said it. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably. They're just yelling it at the podcast right
It's
now.
just yelling, Allie, this is the joke.
It's here. It's here.
We got there. It's okay.
We got
Yes.
that. Don't worry. Got your back.
Thanks.
All right. Well, with that out of the way, we should probably move on to our first question. And question 1 this week is, amid all the debate between people who think tomatoes are fruit and people... Wait a minute.
Uh-oh. What? Say it out loud.
Okay, here's the wording of this question, and I will immediately comment on why I have a problem with it.
All right. I'm excited.
Amid all the debate between people who think tomatoes are fruit and people who are wrong, what do people think about mushrooms?
Now, whoever submitted this question is about to get an earful, I suspect. So let's ride that wave.
I don't even know. I just completely assumed the wording was correct. And now that I'm reading out loud was the first time. So yeah, tomatoes are fruit.
Yeah.
Mhm.
However, the debate here usually is are tomatoes fruit or vegetables? And I am gonna talk about the difference between botanical definitions and culinary definitions
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
here a little bit, because according to a culinary definition, tomatoes are also vegetables.
Mhm.
And that was kind of one. I did write down in my notes that saying a tomato is a fruit is not the same as saying a tomato is not a vegetable.
Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
It's both.
And it's also the legal definition, or at least it was at one point, because they were trying to get tomatoes around certain, I can't remember if it was import fees or if it was, taxation or something, but they defined them as vegetables because culinarily they're more of a vegetable than they are a fruit. And so they were like, well, because of the way that they're used in food, we're going to classify them as vegetables, and it got around whatever that law was or whatever that taxation was.
That's really interesting.
That is interesting because it's also weird because you have your botanical definition and your culinary definition, and then the third one there that Jim just mentioned is the legal definition. And I personally feel that the legal definition is therefore like the most arbitrary and not really like based on anything factual, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Actually, one of the things that I read about the legal definition was that they acknowledge that botanically it is a fruit, but
Okay.
because of how it is used in cuisine, it falls more under the umbrella of vegetable, which I think is kind of interesting because they were like, we know it's a fruit. Don't add us. Is that something people still say? I don't think I've heard anyone say that in a long time.
I think I also remember hearing or reading at some point that vegetables are not like scientifically or botanically real.
Mhm.
That like when you think of a vegetable, like name a vegetable. Jim, go ahead.
Potatoes.
Potato, that's a root.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Celery.
Celery, that's leaves.
Yeah. So here's actually, that brings us perfectly into, I looked it up in the dictionary, specifically the Merriam-Webster one. And it says a vegetable is a usually herbaceous plant grown for an edible part that is usually eaten for a meal. So even in the dictionary definition, it doesn't say like, vegetables are leaves or vegetables are the stem of a plant. It's just like, it's a part of a plant that you eat.
Yeah.
It doesn't even say like it can't be a fruit too.
Well, that's interesting for two reasons, because there are other definitions, and finding specific definitions of words can sometimes be really difficult because people who write dictionaries tend to want their definition to be correct. And there are also, I was going to bring up at one point the difference between theory versus hypothesis and like colloquial theory. Because they're both valid uses of the word, and words can have multiple definitions.
Yes.
But I found one definition. I wish I could find it now that you've brought up Merriam-Webster, because one definition I found for vegetable is parts of a plant that are edible other than the reproductive portions.
Oh,
or something like that.
That just stabs
So
tomatoes in the face right there.
right, essentially excluding fruit
Yeah.
is the thing. But the other reason that point is interesting is specifically the end of this question, and I think what is the meat of the question, which is, that's a bad joke, but
Yeah.
but I did find a culinary definition of vegetable that includes things like peppers and beans, and also includes mushrooms, despite the fact that mushrooms are not even plants.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
corn as well. Corn is,
Yeah.
you know, part of the reproductive process of that plant. So and that's the thing that I think is very interesting, is that mushrooms are not even plants. And
Yeah.
I think a big part of it is that for a very long time, people didn't realize this. Up until relatively recently, you know, they were classified as plants because they grew out of the ground, and people didn't know that they're not doing all of the plant stuff, that they're, you know, digesting other things and eating them, basically.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think a big part of it could stem from that, just the fact that we didn't know that they weren't plants for a very long time.
Yeah. And I read that they now currently still include them as vegetables because I guess they still give you a lot of similar nutrients that vegetables do.
Oh,
That tracks.
okay.
I did not find, I do not have a source on that, so I could be wrong, but it seemed interesting.
I'm going to the Googles. Hold on, I'm muting myself so you don't hear my clicky-clack keyboard.
I mean, I could believe that. A lot of the things that we get from vegetables are things like, I mean, we get a lot of protein from our vegetables, depending on if you're eating things like beans or what have you. Boy, I can't wait till Ali Googles this, because I can't remember any of these things off the top of my head.
Contains protein, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants.
Oh, okay.
1 cup of mushrooms contains about 1.47 milligrams of vitamin C. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Fiber, rich in B vitamins such as riboflavin,
Ribose.
thiamine. There's a lot of Bs. It's like B2, B9, B5.
Yeah.
Sure.
All of the Bs. And then like some iron, some like metals as well, like selenium, copper,
Okay.
iron, phosphorus.
That's interesting because I know that a lot of like vegan and more vegetarian dishes use mushrooms instead of like steak, but I also know that they get a lot of their protein from like bean products.
Mhm.
And interesting that, because I knew mushroom steak is specifically because you can like give it a good flavor there, but I didn't know how nutritious it was, and that's interesting.
Yeah. And that was something I did come across, is the fact that we use mushrooms as meat substitutes. In fact, I think a lot of people actually are able to make fairly convincing like steaks out of mushroom.
Flavor wise.
Yeah.
Flavor-wise.
Well,
Sure.
yeah.
Texture wise, no.
Right. So, and I think that's especially interesting just because I know that mushrooms are actually more closely related to us than they are to plants. So
That was going to be kind of my next point, I guess, or like gentle nod, was that I feel like if we're going to categorize mushrooms as something, it's almost closer to like, say it's a meat rather than a vegetable, because it behaves and is more genetically similar to Animalia.
yeah.
That's interesting because when you're talking about a culinary dish, like if you're putting together a meal, you don't typically say, I mean, I don't know what people typically say, but like someone who is a chef or something, typically won't say where you need your meat and your you need your meat and your plants and your fruits. They'll say you need your vegetables and your protein.
Yeah.
And so like your mushrooms and your beans could be the protein.
Yeah. I mean, there's also something to be said that mushrooms often show up in a lot of things that are more on the vegetable side of things. Like you put mushrooms in salad, you put them in stir fry. So in a lot of ways, that's another way I think people correlate mushrooms to vegetable, because they show up with other vegetables in cuisine.
Yeah. So I looked at the big sticking point, I think, when most people are arguing tomatoes are not a fruit, is the idea that when we hear fruit, we don't think the fruiting body of a plant. We think sweet, treat things like apples and oranges and etc. And so that's because that seems to always be the thing that people who argue against it, because they say, well, does that mean peppers are fruit? And then we'll say, yes, peppers are fruit. And that's always the argument. It's the savory fruits that are the problematic ones for people, I suppose. And I was reading about why some fruit are savory and some fruit are sweet. And really there were a lot of like conjecture things that talk about like evolutionary theories that like maybe the environment it's more conducive to certain plants to have lower sugar. But tomatoes specifically, I learned that as far as we can tell, it seems like tomatoes used to be sweet, and we have bred them for girth rather than for flavor. And we now have tomatoes that have a blander, less sweet flavor as a result of that, which I thought was, I don't know. I like tomatoes, so I can't really say it's disappointing.
Just like the red delicious apple.
That's what I thought of. But I don't like red delicious apples. So.
No, I don't think
they're
anybody likes
the
red
mid
delicious
of apple.
Yeah.
I also feel like tomato is interesting, and I'd almost put it with like citrus fruit a little bit, in that it eats you back a little bit. Like it's acidic enough that it stings your mouth a little if you eat a lot of it. And like that could be its own category as well. But I also think that when we're talking about with cuisine and not necessarily like scientific structure or botanical structure, with fruits and vegetables, when you think of like baking a fruit, right? If you were to make a dish with blackberries, those blackberries are going to kind of get really mushy and fall apart, which a tomato does do.
Yeah.
But if you think of like, if you were to put a whole bunch of peppers in that same heating environment, they're going to get soft, but they're going to get kind of almost like juicier. Like they're not going to fall apart. They're just going to get softer.
Yeah.
I'm sure if you baked it for long enough or cooked it for long enough, it would turn into a nice jammy juice, but like not as easily.
Yeah. That's how you make ketchup, I suppose.
Yeah.
I was going to say, because that's in a way that's like that's like how peppers have the pith in them. And I feel like, I don't know if this is true or not, but tomatoes and peppers, are they closely related? Because they seem like they should be, if not.
I just said tomatoes are berries, but I don't know how that relates them.
Yeah.
Like I don't know enough about that.
Well, let's Google some peppers.
So speaking of baking fruit, and every time I tell somebody this, they get hung up right at the beginning.
They are berry fruit. Sorry.
Oh.
Peppers, that is.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So we're bananas.
I guess I probably knew that, but I forgot. But so one time I found a recipe and was curious enough to try making it of a tomato cake. And when people hear that, they immediately, in my experience, they've immediately been like, oh, that a tomato flavored cake does not sound appetizing at all. And I agree with that mostly. And like I would try it, but but the thing is, this tomato cake consisted of pureeing tomatoes and then also using flour and sugar. And what it ultimately came out, like it was red, but it only very slightly tasted of tomato, and it mostly tasted like just a cake. But the tomato replaced the need for like an oil in it.
Oh, interesting.
So it was That's really cool.
Yeah, so I probably wouldn't make it again, but I'm also not a huge fan of cake anyway.
I want to try that because my son has a book. It's called Thunder Cake, and it's a story about this little girl who's afraid of thunder, and her grandmother's like, well, we got to bake this cake before the storm gets here because then it'll be a real thunder cake. And it's very cute. I like it. But at the back, they have a real recipe on how to make your own thunder cake. And one of the ingredients is like 3 tomatoes. And I want to try it so bad because it makes the cake sound so good. But I had the initial reaction you had where it's like, I don't think that would be a good thing to put in a cake. But the more we read the book over and over again, it's like, I kind of want to try this now.
That's interesting to me. And that's kind of having made it and tried it fully, like just not knowing what to expect at all. But I'm the type of person that like, I want to try it and know what it's like.
Yeah.
I was surprised that it really didn't taste like tomatoes. And everyone I have told that I made this cake immediately assumes a tomato flavored cake is gross.
Yeah, yeah.
I have to be so honest with both of you right now. I cannot conjure the flavor of tomato in my brain. Like, I know the like texture, and I know that it turns into a sauce that I like, but like the individual flavor for tomato in my brain comes from like the oil it's baked in, or the seasoning that's around it, or the like cheese that goes in. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm having a hard time conjuring that individual flavor.
Kind of do. It is a blander flavor. I tend to snack on cherry tomatoes. So those are, like, that's what I think of. Those are a more flavorful tomato, but I also like that flavor.
Yeah, I like to eat cherry tomatoes, and a lot of times if we make like tacos or something, or like a BLT or whatever, anything that needs like you put raw tomatoes in it, basically.
Yeah.
I will just eat the rest of the tomato like an apple.
I've done that.
I think maybe that's my problem, in that I don't like raw tomatoes. Like, I like them cooked, but I don't like just regular tomato.
That makes sense, yeah.
Which is fine. Like, liking them, disliking them, I don't care either way. It's like, I'm not going to be the person that's like picky about food choices, because that seems very like, I don't know, personal to people.
Being like grossed out or disappointed in what other people will eat has always like just not made sense to me very much, because I'm like, you're not eating it. I don't know.
It's not hurting you. Like,
yeah.
There are times when I'm like, oh, I really like this dish. I would wish you would try it, but because there's like something in it you dislike, you won't. I still understand, but part of me is like, oh, like I wish you could enjoy this thing that I also really like.
Yeah, I get that.
Which actually wraps back around nicely to the question, because I don't like mushrooms.
What?
Yeah, I have tried them on many, many occasions, very recently, in fact, and I still don't like them. I try. I really do. I want to like these things so bad. This and sushi and like all these other foods where it's like, I want to like these things so bad. Why, brain? There's something wrong with me. But that, because like, since I've had mushrooms so few times, I can't really conjure the flavor of that in my head. So I'm like, okay, it's like an earthy sort of like bittery-ish, but I can't like, I couldn't tell you like the exact flavor of a mushroom like I can for a tomato, for instance.
Well, it's got like a mushroom kind of taste.
Yeah.
It does. It tastes a little bit like, I'm outing myself here a little. It tastes a little bit like dirt. Like, if I'm completely honest, it has a little bit of dirt.
Yeah.
It tastes like the ground, but it also is like very savory. I love mushrooms. I was a mushroom hater for most of my life.
Wow,
I thought the texture was terrible. And then I really grew into loving them in about high school. And I will mess up any mushroom. Enoki mushrooms are like my absolute favorite.
Yeah, I'm on team mushroom for sure.
It's funny because the texture doesn't bother me. It's the taste.
I always have to, like, whenever people are saying, oh, I don't really like this thing, because I completely accept if you don't like this food, that's fine. I agree with Allie that, like, if I enjoy something, I want to bring that joy to someone else and share it with them. But I also, my sticking point is like, if you haven't tried it, you don't know that you don't like it. But I also, there are a lot of foods that I like as a not very picky eater that are like pretty universally disliked by people. And so I've gotten used to being like, okay, probably if I like it, that you don't, and that's fine. That is another reason I don't understand when people are like, you need to agree with me about this.
Yeah, that's silly. And I mean, Jim, to your credit, you have continued to try foods that you know you don't like. Yeah. And I really give you like a tip of my hat for that. And that a lot of times people will try things like once and be like, oh, that's not really for me. And then that's the end of that conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that you continue to trudge forward in the sushi and mushroom mountain that lies ahead of you.
And I figure, eventually I liked coffee after a spell. So maybe one of these days I'm going to have one and be like, I finally have a taste for this now.
Your taste buds do change.
That's true. In a few different times in life. I believe when you're a baby, they're like super duper sensitive. And then again, when you're like a teenager to an adult, they start to like settle in a little bit more. So you don't dislike as many different kinds of spices and vegetables and stuff.
Yeah,
in your
interesting.
Kind of semi-adulthood. Yeah. I also think that mushrooms are just so weird in that they're unlike really anything else around. Like,
yeah,
mushrooms to me are like, if you were to ask me what I think the closest form of alien life is, I'd point at a mushroom. They're so bizarre. I don't necessarily understand them in the way that they spore and like spread out and then grow and decay. It's like very cool and beautiful, but also like, I don't know if I vibe with that. Like, you seem like you know something I don't, mushroom.
I want to say, I don't know if this is not an answer to the question, and I wasn't even really going to say it, but I do think it flows from that comment. So I will, like, one of the things that I thought was interesting about this question, just anything about mushrooms, is lately I've been like watching how many mushrooms are growing in my yard over the summer and just trying to like let them, because they're good for the soil and everything. And I've been trying to like kind of get to know more which mushrooms are which and seeing how they grow on certain things. And it occurred to me that I like animals a lot. And it's really kind of easy for me to quantify why, because I can like see how they have a life. I can see like their behavior. And plants to some degree, like I get, like, I know the process of a plant's life cycle, and that's pretty common among all plants. And mushrooms are just, like Ali is saying, just this foreign thing. Yeah. And so just lately, I've been looking into, I think it's mycology, I'm not positive, like study of fungus and stuff. And I'm like, I want to like learn more. And for whatever reason, I'm like, what is there to know? Like, not that there isn't, I don't know how to phrase it, I guess. I'm like, I have such a lack of understanding of fungus that I'm like, how do I even begin other than they aren't plants?
Right.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot in that I have a pretty good understanding of like photosynthesis and root systems and like how a tree like changes its leaves in the fall and like all of that stuff. Yes, that absolutely makes sense. And then like mushrooms are just this like, you grow like a plant, but you don't photosynthesize. You have a root system, but it's
not roots.
It's not roots.
And it's not really roots. It's like roots, and you can kind of communicate through them. And I don't like that. And what are your secrets?
What are your secrets, mushroom?
I will agree, though. I think that you're right. Like, if we find alien life somewhere, I think it's going to be more like a mushroom or more like fungi than anything else, except for maybe bacteria. It might be more that bacteria might be the odds-on favorite, but if it's multicellular, I'm going to put my money on fungi.
And octopi.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Octopodes?
Octopodes. Octopodes, octopuses, octopi. Whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, because I don't really know what mushrooms taste like, I think my next question is, do they taste like vegetables?
No.
But it is hard to describe flavor of anything if you haven't, because I very recently learned that this is derailing completely, but I very recently learned from someone who was discussing American usage of Japanese words. A word that has become very prominent in American culture lately is umami.
Oh, yeah.
And umami, from a Japanese perspective, at least one Japanese perspective that I've heard, umami in Japan is typically just used to describe flavor. It is a word that means flavor. And in America, we seem to have replaced savory with umami.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of interesting. But that, to circle it back to Jim asking if mushrooms taste like plants, it's if you haven't tasted it, it is really difficult to explain a flavor to someone.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's true of everything.
People will always say eel doesn't taste like anything, and it just tastes like eel. And I'm like, I've tasted eel, and I know what eel tastes like.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, to me, it's like the sauce that's on the eel that is the flavor. But I also think that what's interesting with mushroom in that, kind of back to what I said earlier, where like the vegetables get soft, mushrooms do get soft, but they also get like, almost like how meat gets kind of less tender. Yeah. Mushrooms also get less tender when they cook. They're still soft, but there's like a tenseness in them when you cook them, in my opinion.
Mushrooms are really good at absorbing the flavor of a dish, which is why they are in so many things, because they can be like a rice in that sense.
Yeah, they kind of punch it up when like you get like bursts of flavor inside these little packets of mushroom.
Yeah.
Man, I want mushrooms.
I think it's super interesting just that like mushrooms are so different than all of the other foods because they're their own kingdom. Like fungi are a fundamentally different kind of life than animals or plants, and yet they fit into our cuisine so seamlessly.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll find a way to eat anything.
That's true.
We like eating.
Yeah.
My brother was just watching that Delicious in Dungeon show that I think Allie talked about last time.
Oh, yeah. I started watching that with Whitney.
So I've watched a couple episodes of it a long time ago, and I just saw a scene from it where one of the characters is recounting his experience fighting like an animated suit of armor.
Yes.
And he tells this whole story, and I was like, okay, this is fun. I get what's going on here. And then he says, and I really want to know what it tastes like. And I was like, I know the show isn't this, but like that isolated scene, I was like, what is this like really creepy attitude that like you want to eat everything? I don't know. It was out of context. It was a weird scene.
That was the one where I was like, really, guy? Are you sure?
Okay.
Although he ends up being justified because it turns out that the animated suits of armor are being controlled by little crustaceans or whatever.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't finish the episode.
But nobody knew that, least of all him, so.
Okay.
And like his whole party does be like, Laios, you cannot eat armor. And he's like, I know, but I want to.
It reminded me of like Metal Gear Solid 3, where it's just like it suddenly becomes every animal you catch. What does it taste like? I need to know what it tastes like.
Yeah.
I don't know how dated that reference is.
I love Metal Gear Solid 3. So
it wasn't
you're
just
in good
me.
company.
Yay.
The ladder that lasts forever with the theme
music
is
with the theme
an
music.
iconic moment.
Yep.
Oh, I haven't thought about that in such a long time.
Well, I think we should probably move on.
Yeah, I'm pretty tapped out on mushroom content. I do want to eat them now, though.
We do want to eat some mushrooms.
Yeah.
Well, mushrooms do go well in dishes made of meat. And the next question is about animals. There's our segue.
Which can also go in dishes with meat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're the meat.
They're the meat. They're the meat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel bad now for the rest of this question, but here we go.
In we go.
So question 2 this week comes to us from Mark, and it actually comes from a conversation we had with Mark on the show.
That's right.
What are the most successful interspecies partnerships? And the episode that I'm referring to is episode 154, Sonic and the Secret Rings.
I forgot I called
or
it
was
that.
it was Saturn and the Secret Rings? My mistake.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I auto-corrected that in my head. So
yeah. Well, I'm glad I had to fix it. But yeah, we talked about. I think it was Jim's fun science fact. That episode was dogs and humans have been working together since at least 15,000 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where that came from. So that's the first one on my list is dogs and humans.
That was the first one of mine.
That was the first on mine. Yeah. I mean, it's iconic, right?
Yeah.
Man's best friend. Like, it's such a, like, natural pair that kind of happened on its own, where it's like dogs just started to follow, or rather, the proto-dogs would start following humans around because they were these weird apes that left trash behind them. And it was like, oh, we'll eat the trash. And then, you know, they also have fire. And so we can kind of stay closer and stay a little bit warm. And then because the dogs are staying closer, other animals are staying farther away from the humans. And it just kind of like very naturally converged into this alliance. And now I have 2 of them that live in my home and are bent to my will.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how that, because I looked up a few others that, I have a bit of a list here. Not all of them are worth mentioning, but there are a few other predatory animals that work together in hunting. And that's always surprising because you think predatory animals are kind of like they wouldn't want other animals to get their food.
Right.
But like they do recognize the benefit of teamwork, which is cool.
I actually misread the question a while ago because, not a while ago, but today when I was looking things up, but I included this anyway. So I'm glad because I thought it said friendships. And
okay, no, that's fine.
And so this one I was almost not going to mention. And then when you reread it, I was like, oh, okay, this is totally valid because I was thinking of bees and various plants. Because they have, to the point where now a lot of plants are in danger because a lot of bees are in danger. And so because bees are such excellent fertilizers. They go around and they pollinate all of these various plants. And I think that's one of the most successful partnerships in all of nature.
I was going to extend that out because I was thinking very similarly. I thought of bees and flowers, but I've got these vines that grow in my house that produce berries in the fall. And all of these starlings come and eat the berries and then they poop on my car. And the berries are always in the poop on my car.
Yeah.
But that is such a like perfectly paired evolutionary strategy where it's like the birds get nutrition from the berries and the plant benefits in that its seeds get scattered all over the place. Right. And like that is such a like, again, no, the bird or the plant neither agreed to this, but it made sense in the timeline of their history.
Yeah. The plant like pollination and seed dispersal methods that rely on animals are just incredible. Yeah. And I would say some of those are some of the most successful pairings in nature.
I think that's interesting that you bring that up, Jim, because I did discount a lot of animal-plant relationships when I was like putting thought to this, but a point I wanted to make and kind of came up more naturally than I expected to was that a lot of symbiotic relationships that we have cataloged are between animals and a plant of some kind. And that's kind of like, I mean, you've both already said this, but like it's not something they worked out an agreement on. It's just they work.
Yeah. Similarly with like clownfish and the anemone, right? Neither of them really evolved. Well, they evolved to do this thing, but it ended up working out that they could have a mutual benefit from the clownfish having a home inside the anemone and picking off any parasites and keeping other things away from it. And, you know, the anemone doesn't hurt or kill the clownfish.
Is it that the clownfish is like immune to it? Or I'm not sure.
I thought they had a layer of mucus on their skin or something that prevented the stinging from like puncturing them. Or I might be wrong about that, though. I'm glad you're Googling it.
Because I guess it was worth asking.
National Marine Society. Sounds good. The partnership between anemones and clownfish is known as mutualism because it provides mutual benefits to both animals. Safe place to live. Parasites chase away fish like butterfly fish. Yes. But why? The clownfish waste fertilizes the anemone. I didn't think about that. And helps them to breathe, grow, and reproduce. But why doesn't it sting? This was not a good article.
This was we just have a very simple question.
a mucus coating will begin to develop on the fish's scales.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
After it's been exposed to the venom. So the venom causes this mucus buildup.
That's interesting.
That's fascinating.
Although that actually does make me think of another partnership that I think is worth mentioning, and that is the various little fish that will swim around sharks and like nip the little parasites off the sharks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's also super cool. And I can't remember what it was, but there was one where it's like these little fish will go in and like clean the teeth of a larger fish, and the larger fish doesn't eat them, even though it, by all rights, absolutely could just close its mouth and swallow like 4 of them.
I believe
because
it's
it wants the
sharks.
parasites gone. Is that also sharks?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's super cool.
The thing that reminds me of is crocodile and the plover bird.
Yeah.
Which I always, because the plover bird will come and eat stuff off of the crocodile's teeth, and the same thing, like you'd expect that's a free meal for the crocodile right there, but it cleans their teeth, so they let it happen.
I believe there's some that also will park on their backs too and like get all of the like moss and stuff that's building up between their scales out.
Mm-hmm.
I had another one too that I thought was, I don't even know if we can call it like a mutual partnership, but I think that there are enough benefits from both. Hey, can you not like roll on the floor next to my microphone? That would be kind of cool of you. Thanks. The other one that I was thinking of that again, it's so hard to quantify these as partnerships because there's no real like handshake agreement, but humans and our microbiome, like we have bacteria. I mean, bacteria makes up most of the cell count in our body, right? And some of that bacteria is bad, but a lot of that bacteria is good, right? Our gut bacteria, the bacteria on our skin, like all of that stuff is usually there for a purpose to help keep us kind of safe and kind of functional. But the bacteria also gets a warm body to stay in.
Yeah. Yeah, and we kind of need them. So that just worked out.
I still don't like the 70 to 90% of all cells in the human body are bacterial. I don't like that. That's too many.
That's cosmic. It's far too many. That's cosmic horror is what that is.
Yeah. 39 trillion microbial cells.
Well, listen, if they were so smart, they'd be smarter than us, and they're not, so
they need to get smart. Good. They'd be smarter. I feel like that implies that being smarter than us is kind of a low bar.
Well...
I'm not disagreeing with it. I just thought it was funny. I wanted to talk about this. We're talking about an agreed upon partnership. We're also talking about whether or not it actually is mutualism. There is a benefit from two things. Because I looked at, I have 3 different examples here. I learned that coyotes and badgers will occasionally hunt together. And they'll kind of share their prey, which is I just didn't expect. Meanwhile, zebra and ostriches tend to travel together because they can kind of like keep a lookout for each other for predators, and like bigger numbers means they're more defended. And then the thing I wanted to contrast that to was jackals and cheetahs, because these are another animal that kind of hunt together, but the jackal is a scavenger. So the jackal will let the cheetah go out and do all the work.
Oh.
So like the jackal's benefiting from that partnership, but the cheetah is really just not at all.
Not. Yeah.
So I would say that is not one of the best partnerships in animals. The jackals need to pull their weight a bit.
Yeah, they need to like maybe offer some protection for the cheetah while it's doing the work, like kind of like a bodyguard or something.
I mean
that's really cool.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I think that if there is a like agreed upon partnership that like we as humans can connect to, I think it's not humans and dogs necessarily. Although I think that is a fabulous partnership. But
it's humans and gut flora again.
No, my gut biome hates me all the time. I think it's actually like domestic cats, because we both have kind of like, I mean, again, I love my cat. I think cats are great pets. There are people that are like, oh, cats are independent and they don't love you as much as dogs. I disagree with that wholly.
That's a person who's never owned a cat.
Yeah, I think both animals love in different ways, but they are equally loving and affectionate. However, cats didn't have a necessary reason to be domesticated. They kind of domesticated themselves because they saw a benefit with us.
Yeah.
They were like, there's food here that I can eat. And then we as humans were like, well, the cats are eating the mice. So there's like, our grain is protected. So like they can stay. And it just kind of ended up being this like, okay, you do this for me and you can stay. And the cat's like, yeah, bet. And then it just kind of worked out.
Yeah. And that's neat because it shows that level of intelligence in an animal that, like, when you look at something like a mouse or something, most of the time mice look at humans and they're like, that thing is big, therefore dangerous. And cats, like, we could eat cats if we wanted to, you know, like, and the cats are aware of that, but they also recognized that we don't.
Yeah.
So good job, cats.
Good job, cats.
I don't know why, but because we started talking about bacteria, it made me think of the nitrogen-fixing bacteria that live in the soil, and they have formed a relationship with certain plants. And so that's sort of the foundation of crop rotation, where you grow some plants that do not have the nitrogen-fixing bacteria relationship, and it sort of depletes the soil. And then the following year, you plant the plants that do have the nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which I think soybeans are a really good example of this, I think. I think it's a lot of legumes tend to have the nitrogen-fixing bacteria situation. But that's a really great partnership because it keeps the soil going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all unintentional.
Yeah.
Well, it's so hard because it's unintentional, but it's not, I don't even know how to say what I'm thinking. Like, it's not intentional, but it works, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it works because it works. And it works because sometimes these small, minute changes in genetics make that possible. And then when small, minute genetic changes happen in one species closely tied to another completely independent species, it can alter that species' behavior as well. And it's just like so interesting to think of that ripple effect out.
Yeah. And it's also worth noting that if it didn't work, then they wouldn't do it, or it wouldn't have evolved in the way that it did. So, which I think is just, and that this is not an answer to the question, but I feel like it's very similar in a lot of ways to the predator-prey relationship, where, you know, prey out-evolve the predator and they become more successful. So the predator then changes their behaviors or their, they basically change in response to that. And so it sort of reaches this equilibrium of, this arms race between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also feel like, and I know this has been discussed at length on this podcast, but that it's not necessarily that like the prey is choosing to get better and then the predators choose a new tactic. It's just the ones that the ones that change either accidentally or if there is some like intelligence and tool use, whatever, it's usually just kind of a whoopsie. And then that animal with that thing lives longer and has more offspring. It's not like a choice. It's an accident. And that accident either pays off or it doesn't.
Yeah.
I'm getting existential.
No, but that calls it back to exactly to your point of cats is like, this is not a decision that the cats made unilaterally. Like they did not, unilaterally is the wrong word, but there was not a council of cats, despite what T.S. Eliot said, that got together and said, we need to form an alliance with the humans. It is just, they just all kind of figured it out. And now cats do that.
Yeah. And they give good cuddles.
Yeah. I firmly stand by the idea that cats are aware of how cute we think they are, and they use that to their advantage.
I don't know if this is scientifically true or not, but I did read somewhere that cats will meow at us because they know that we think it's cute. And
I've heard that.
That's their way of like kind of manipulating us a little bit, because they don't do that to other cats. Like they usually don't meow like that at other cats. They just do it for us.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading about that. That is true, because meowing is not a way to communicate, but kittens bond with their mothers through purring, but not through meowing. And that, yeah.
It's very, very interesting to me that there's almost like a dialect of cat that is just for humans.
They're trying to learn our language.
Yeah.
Without having lips and the correct vocal cords.
They're trying, though.
They're trying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I laughed a minute ago because I was thinking about the fact that we grow sugar cane, and sugar cane is just a great boon to our entire lives because we get sugar out of that.
That's true.
Is the sugar cane doesn't get anything out of
shoe
it.
dropping? Okay.
Yeah. Well, they get to grow. I mean, sugar cane gets to spread
True.
and be farmed, so I guess they get that out of it.
True. I mean, is that a contender? Is just like agriculture and humanity as the best partnership?
Oh boy.
Because like that's some scholars argue that agriculture is the start of civilization.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we're including the plant bonds with animals, we now have like forests that we farm and make sure that the trees don't go extinct and are recycled and stuff. And but like, how much of that is arguably parasitic because we've dominated, like crops are specifically for our benefit.
Yeah.
And the only reason we keep them renewable is so that we don't run out of them. It's not to help the plants themselves.
That's true.
I'm now being all existential.
This is an existential. It's because we were all talking about mushrooms earlier, and now we're all existential about it.
It's because we were talking about mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I said. I mean, I'm going to backtrack to mushrooms now. Sure. I mean, it's so weird to me. You can put this in the other part, Jim, if you want, but I'm saying it here, that some mushrooms are delicious. Some mushrooms will kill you instantly. And some mushrooms will get you blasted. Like, what evolutionary goal does that mean? It's crazy.
I mean, the ones that are poisonous and the ones that make you just completely trip out of your mind, those are designed to deter you from eating them,
right?
To varying degrees
fair.
of success.
We're just psychotic.
But then why didn't they all evolve some kind of defense mechanism like that?
Well, the same reason that, like, why aren't all insects poisonous?
But yeah, I mean, you have to mutate in just the right way to get that going. So good point.
I don't know. That's the nebulous nature of talking about, like, why does this animal do this? It's like, well, we can talk about what benefit that gives to the animal, but we can't actually figure out why they started doing that. Like, that's just, it happened.
It was a whoopsie and it stuck around.
Mm-hmm.
All right, listeners, there's more to say. There's more animals to talk about. We could be here for hours. So let me know this week, why aren't symbiotic relationships between animals and plants considered fruit? I don't. Yeah, if you have a thought on that or anything, reasonable that we actually talked about in this episode, you can email us at feedback@vaguelyscientific.com, or you can comment on our blog, or you can like us on Facebook, or tweet at vaguelysci, or comment on a YouTube video. Hey, Jim, where do we get all these wacky questions?
We get them from you, the listener. And if you have a question that needs to be answered in a vaguely scientific manner, please email us at questions@vaguelyscientific.com. If you want to get our episodes the minute that they're released, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and all the other great places that cool podcasts like to hang out. And subscribing and leaving feedback really helps us out, and so does telling your friends.
Yeah, whether they like mushrooms or not.
Yeah. Our vaguely musical intro is composed by Anthony Pizzelli, and don't forget to check out our merch store over at vaguelyscientific.threadless.com. You can't get any mushrooms, but we did mention that octopi are from space, and there is a design about that in the store somewhere.
That's
Well,
true.
You can't get mushrooms yet.
That's
Yet.
true.
We're
should
working on it.
do a cool mushroom design of some sort.
Oh, that would be fun.
Mushrooms are fruit.
Oh, yeah.
Someone would buy that, I hope.
So probably. Well, thank you to Allie for being our guest this week.
Hey, thank you guys for having me on again. This was such a blast.
Yeah. For Vaguely Scientific, I am Derek.
I'm Jim.
I'm Allie.
And the winner by technical knockout, the listener.
Oh.
We'll see you next time.
Toodaloo, everyone.
Bye. Oh, you guys, I have one. I have the worst partnership contender. Can I air that real quick?
Oh, sure.
I think it's pandas and bamboo. 'Cause neither of them benefit the other.
Yeah.
No, not at all. Do you want that in the episode? You could.
That's up to you guys. I don't care.
That could be the stinger.
There you go. There's our stinger.